Jury selection in the Derek Chauvin trial begins a week from today. He's the ex-Minneapolis police officer charged with killing George Floyd, an unarmed black man, by kneeling on his neck until he stopped breathing. This is a case we'll all be watching closely, especially our next guest. He is Marc Lamont Hill, a colleague who has a show here as well. He's a journalist, author, professor at Temple University, and of course a member of the BNC family. Marc, welcome to the show. Congratulations on your show. We'll talk about that momentarily, but let's talk about this trial first and foremost. We all hope to see a conviction in this to get the justice that we rightfully think George Floyd's family deserves. But what do you expect to see starting next week?
You should expect to see a battle, an all-out battle. You know, over the last 6 months, we've seen all of America stand with George Floyd, stand with George Floyd's family. There have been Democrats, Republicans, people who have never challenged the police before, who were forced to reckon with that 8 minutes and 42 seconds on the video of Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. What's different now, though, is that we're in a legal battle where no one will concede a point, where people will begin to tell you about George Floyd, how bad George Floyd is, what his history was, and you'll begin to see many of the racial demons of America rise up. And it'll begin with this jury selection.
But Marc, and we're already jumping to a would-be conclusion because we can't help it, because we've been in pain before. Do we need to prepare once again as Black people for disappointment, for heartbreak, for horror when the verdict comes in? Do we need to prepare for it, or 8 minutes, 46 seconds? No, not this time.
As Black folks say, you stay ready so you don't got to get ready. You know, we've seen so many times in this country's history painful moments of disappointment. We watched Rodney King be beaten in front of our eyes on tape. There was no doubt in most people's minds what happened, and yet we got an outcome that we didn't expect or that we didn't want. And so from that moment to Trayvon Martin, to Michael Brown, we could go on and on to Tamir Rice, we've had so many moments of disappointment that we have to prepare ourselves. I'd like to believe that this is an easier case. He was fired. Derek Chauvin was fired. The other officers were fired. Charges were drawn relatively quickly compared to other instances. The odds, the evidence, the signs all point to a more just and favorable outcome. But in this country, we have to always be prepared for an outcome that we don't want.
But when you talk about some of the other cases like Trayvon Martin, obviously we wanted justice in that case. We saw it on tape with Rodney King over 30 years ago. It appears we saw the information. We saw the stuff that was on tape and the things that should have led to a conviction. In this case, when the whole world was watching and everybody got behind what was happening here in the United States, not just here in the United States, but around the world, and you see a man being killed for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, basically a snuff film. If there is no conviction in this particular case, as deflating as the other cases have been in our community, how deflating will this one be, Marc?
It'll be a generational heartbreak. You know, we were many of us were deflated when Rodney King was killed. There was a generation of people who were deflated when Emmett Till, when he was killed in 1955. When it took decades to get justice. I mean, in their lifetimes, they didn't see justice. There was a generation deflated. Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, many young activists were deflated. I think this will be just another moment. But I think the difference this time, Mike, to your point, is that an entire nation seemed to get behind this. This seems like a no-brainer. This seems like the lowest of low-hanging fruit. And if we don't get justice now, I'm afraid of what we'll see. I'm not talking about violence in the streets. I'm talking about a real failure to believe that America has the capacity to produce justice for Black folk.
Marc, it seems to me that there's this internal struggle with us Black folks, right? You have defund the police, the cries over there to people, and sometimes it's generational, the divide, who say, no, not all police are bad. We can save this. Arguments about qualified immunity and the like. But isn't this trial, George Floyd should be here. Isn't this trial about more? Isn't it about the history of policing in America? And don't we all need a lesson in that?
I think that's exactly right. If we reduce this to the case of a rogue officer and 3 bystanding officers who just did nothing, then we miss the point. This is a bigger question. The marches we saw in June, May, June, July, they raised bigger questions about, again, the capacity of America to produce justice for Black folk and the institutions that make it harder for us to see justice. One of those institutions, in many people's minds, is the police department. So what we have to do, as you said, Sharon, is as we go through this trial, as we go through the media representation of the trial, we have to also be thinking not just about these individual officers, but about the systems themselves. That's a question that should have been raised with Eric Garner. It's a question that should have been raised with Freddie Gray and Breonna Taylor and Renisha McBride and so many others. And I hate that we have such a laundry list of names to even go on. But we have to talk about the systems and raise questions about the systems.
Yeah, it's not about just the cops. It's about the cops who enforce a racist system and the training that's involved there. Real quickly, of course, the trial starts next week. I want to talk to you because you're our colleague. I love your last name. Obviously, that's my cousin right there, Marc Lamont Hill. Not really cousin, my play cousin. But you got a show coming up pretty soon here on BNC. Tell us about it real quick.
Man, I'm so excited to be hosting Black News Tonight, 8 o'clock daily. We'll be getting started very, very soon. And we will be talking about everything. We're going to be trying to cover some of the heavy stuff. We'll be covering some of the biggest news in Black America, whether it's a trial like this or whether it's something that happens viral on the internet. You know, I was talking last week and I said, you know, I want to cover everything from politics to Gorilla Glue to Bobby Shmurda to the vaccine.
And you're versatile enough to do it, Marc. I love you, love the professor in you. They said I had to go to bed at